Welcome back. As the country observes Youth Day and challenges facing young people, we are now joined by the Youth20 South Africa's Levi Singh. Y20 is a platform for young people to engage on issues affecting them for the upcoming G20 summit later this year. Mr. Levi Singh, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon. So we heard the address by the Deputy President a little earlier, and him speaking about young people not living in a future in which they envisioned. From the interactions that you have with young people, what future, what present day realities are young people expressing in your circles in terms of what they experience?
Thanks, Katlego, and thank you for having us. As the Y20, we have been working through our working groups to hear from young people what priorities they would like to see being expressed in South Africa's hosting of the G20. And obviously, the big issues that have been highlighted persistently from young people are issues around the economic crisis and joblessness. We have a vast amount of young people who are isolated from any and all economic opportunities. Issues around deepening inequality, especially since the COVID crisis, and more so issues around safety and security, especially as these pertain to not just gender-based violence, but violence throughout the South African society. So we see these unique combination of factors as the key issues that keep young people awake at night and continue to concern them in their daily lives in the South African context.
So there really isn't a reality of many young people being despondent, but rather those that are trying to find alternative ways, like you say, in ensuring that they're not isolated from some of those economic activities.
This is true. I think it's also worth appreciating that young people in South Africa are incredibly resilient, and we tend to see young people trying to find means and ways to break into the informal economy and to participate in some arena of economic activity. And this is where, through our Y20 process, we want to work further with the private sector and the startup sector in particular to look at means and ways to ensure that there are greater economic pathways afforded to young people so that they can determine their economic futures and start generating incomes for themselves and really apply their autonomy and agency that they have inherently, and that is recognized by our constitution and our legislative instruments. So partnerships and leveraging alliances with the private sector in particular will be instrumental to continue deepening the resilience and innovation and ingenuity of the young people of South Africa.
I mean, speaking of those partnerships, many young people, they really feel politically disillusioned in South Africa and somewhat disconnected quite a lot of the times from government structures. As Y20, how do you help rebuild this trust and just ensuring that you inspire active civic participation, especially among young people?
That's a very loaded question, Katlego, so I'd like to ask you how much time you have. But in any case, I think with the issue of the trust deficit between young people and people in power, it's not just an issue that is a reality that young South Africans are facing. I think it's a manifestation of geopolitics at this moment, where young people's faith in democratic institutions in particular is breaking down. And ultimately, as the Y20 in South Africa, we've sought to democratize a exclusive and isolation process that is usually very removed from the lived realities of young people in the global South, on the African continent, and in South Africa in particular. And we've really premised our South African Y20 program on this principle of radical inclusivity. And this means trying our best as a team to reach out to every movement, constituency, and community of young people in South Africa in their diversity. And going back to the previous theme that I had mentioned on partnerships, so really leveraging our alliances with the labor movement, the women's movement, the HIV movement, and broader public health movement in South Africa to reach young people where they are on the ground and to ensure that we have a mechanism in place through our working groups that are able to take the insight and perspectives that young people are bringing to the table, to bring their ideas and their innovation to spaces where they can be amplified so that policymakers can really take note of the tangible ideas and solutions that young people are putting forward to address some of the most pressing issues, from climate change to concerns around artificial intelligence, or just hunger, poverty, and deepening inequality. And the working groups, I'm glad to announce, have received over 2,000 applications from young people, not just in South Africa, but across the African continent and the global South. So really indicating this deep wanting to have their voices heard, and to really ensure that their ideas are brought to the table where decisions are being made, and that decision makers are able to see that young people are constructive and also deeply concerned about their futures and willing to take their futures in their own hands by bringing productive and constructive solutions to the table.
I mean, Levi, you speak of all the organizations that already exist in which you're able to reach out to and be able to speak to those young people and have their voices contribute a lot of the times to a lot of the policies that are put together. But there's also that missing middle of not so active young people. We saw, especially with the elections last year, that a huge chunk of young people who were eligible to vote just did not participate. How are you ensuring that you reach even those young people at the very grassroots level?
That's a great question, Katlego, and it's a question that we continue to grapple with. And I think it's worth noting that not all young people are going to engage in the established channels that we have, and even in partnership with the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities or the National Youth Development Agency. This is a shared issue that we all grapple with in terms of encouraging young people to participate in these more established sort of channels. But I think we've really tried to look at leveraging not just social media and digital media, but community media to ensure that young people have these avenues afforded to them to participate, that they understand it's their democratic right to participate, and that there is a seat for them at whatever table, at whatever level. It's really just about breaking down those artificial barriers that exist between them, power, influence, and the decision makers, which ultimately they should be holding to account. So it's really a more longitudinal process that we're looking at this at, and in combination with other factors to deepen young people's confidence in democracy and in democratic structures, in the intergovernmental system, and more broadly, the multilateral system in the context of G20. As I had mentioned earlier, there is a breakdown of young people's faith in the multilateral system, but at the same time, young people are reaching out on a one-to-one level and building communities, both offline and online, to advance issues around social justice, be it from racial justice to gender justice to climate justice. And I think it's really about us capitalizing on these self-organized groupings of young people who are at the grassroots level and providing platform and space for them to express their interests and their concern and their ideas to those who are in power at the moment, but also to support them in organizing themselves by unlocking resources and by facilitating platforms and spaces for them to convene where power is. So it's not an easy question to address, and there's no easy answer, but our unique contribution really is to try to unlock resources and to foster greater investment into some of these self-organizing movements, as well as tapping into the digital space where young people already are and organizing themselves.
Well, certainly. So lastly, what legacy do you hope to leave with Y20 in South Africa, especially just for the next generation of leaders on the continent?
That's a great question, Katlego. So it's worth noting that South Africa will only host the G20 again in 2044. So we have once in a generation opportunity really as young people to input into a future-facing and progressive agenda that is for and by and with young people. I think it's also worth noting that this is the first G20 in which the African Union will be a full member of the G20. So it's not just about South Africa and Africa, but about the global South at large in terms of our prioritization and what we hope to achieve as our legacy. And as a Y20 South Africa, we have two very clear and succinct outcomes, of which we hope to achieve through the Y20 summit, and which we hope to find expression within the Leaders' Declaration in November when the G20 summit happens. So the first recommendation that we hope to achieve is really around an alumni council for the Y20. The Y20 is the oldest engagement group within the G20 process. It was established in 2010, and ultimately you can see through that initiative, young people have been leading historically, but we haven't necessarily seen a structured approach to the Y20 between the respective member states chairing in the G20. So the alumni network is really an intention to bring together the brilliant work that has been done over the last 15 years or so, being led by young people, and to ensure that the policy positions and recommendations that have been put forward by young people are actually finding expression in the form of national policy programs that, again, unlock investment and allow young people to meaningfully engage in the policy direction of respective member states. The second and final high-level ambition that we hope to achieve through our Y20 program is the establishment of a Y20/G20 Youth Council, which will continue to deepen young people's participation in multilateral spaces, but in particular ensure that young people are finding expression in tangible and meaningful ways in the multilateral process, so that we're democratizing these processes continually, and we're restoring young people's trust and faith, and reducing that distance between decision makers and young people in the diversity. This is the largest generation of young people in human history, and ultimately we need to affirm the importance of multilateralism, and we need to maintain human-to-human and person-to-person connection in order to do that. So this is an existential priority for us to ensure that young people believe in multilateralism and its role in creating a shared future that is prosperous, equitable, and livable with dignity for all young people in the diversity.
Well, I mean, it was young people that got us this far in ensuring that we enjoy the democracy that we enjoy today. So we really are looking forward to those engagements and dialogues that you will be having with the young people of South Africa and of the continent, and sharing those ideas and bringing us solutions to some of those global challenges. Levi Singh, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.